Some machines are engineered to impress you in a showroom. Others are engineered to survive 20 years of Monday mornings, monsoon floods, and the kind of neglect that would kill a lesser vehicle in months. This is a story about the second kind, in an industry obsessed with horsepower figures and flashy new releases. There's a quieter virtue that most riders only come to appreciate after a decade behind the handlebars, the simple and glamorous ability to just keep running. No roadside breakdowns at 6 in the morning. No frantic calls to a mechanic who's already closed for the day. No pushing a dead machine 3 kilometers home in the rain. In 2026, a select group of scooters have earned something money can't buy directly, or reputation forged not by advertising, but by owners, mechanics, fleets, and delivery riders who've quietly put these machines through years of abuse and watched them keep starting anyway. By the time this countdown reaches its final number, you'll know exactly which machines are engineered to survive almost anything, and one of them, sitting right in the middle of this list, has a reputation so strong that mechanics privately admit they'd rather not sell it. Because a machine that never breaks down never brings repeat business. Let's begin at number 15, with a story that starts unexpectedly. As a cost-cutting decision, number 15 carries a secret most owners never learn. The very thing that makes it legendary was never meant to be a reliability feature at all. When this engine was originally developed, engineers detuned its output for one simple reason: cost. A smaller state of tune meant cheaper components, lower manufacturing expense, a friendlier price tag on the showroom floor. Nobody set out to build a reliability icon. But years later, service centers began noticing something strange. These slightly underpowered units were coming back for major repairs at a fraction of the rate of their more powerful siblings. Running an engine below its ceiling meant less internal stress, less heat, less wear on every single revolution, and what started as a budget decision quietly became one of the best accidental engineering lessons in the industry. That's the story mechanics now tell new apprentices. Sometimes the cheapest engine in the lineup outlives all the expensive ones. Owners describe a quiet trust in this scooter rather than excitement. It starts on the first try after weeks of sitting untouched, and it asks almost nothing of them in return. It was never built to be fast. It became something more valuable instead. But the next scooter on this list didn't stumble into its reputation by accident. It was engineered for it. Deliberately, from the very first sketch. At number 14, we meet a manufacturer whose quality control philosophy borders on obsession. Ask any independent mechanic who services multiple brands which entry-level scooter arrives in their shop looking the least worn after 5 years. And this name comes up more often than any other. The detail mechanics notice long before customers ever do. Every bolt, every gasket, every wiring connector on this scooter survives a punishing internal testing regime before it ever reaches a showroom vibration. Cycles and heat-soaked tests compressed into months of laboratory torture that most rivals simply skip to save time. The result feels almost like over-engineering for something in this price bracket. Riders routinely cross 80,000 kilometers with nothing more demanding than oil changes and fresh tires. That kind of consistency isn't an accident. It's a company culture where reliability isn't a marketing bullet point. It's a promise the brand renews with every single unit that leaves the factory. For an owner, that translates into predictability. Rare in daily transportation, you climb on, and you already know exactly how the day will go. It costs more upfront than some rivals, but resale values stay firm. Because used buyers understand something showroom shoppers often miss, a well-maintained unit from this brand is, in many ways, just getting started. Precision like that isn't cheap. But the next scooter proves you don't need a premium price tag to earn a premium reputation. You just need the right customers testing it for you. For free. Number 13 owes its legend entirely to a group of people who never asked to become reliability testers, delivery riders. Across cities where food and parcel delivery runs on razor-thin margins, this scooter quietly became the default choice, not because anyone marketed it that way, but because word spreads fast among people whose income depends entirely on a working engine. 12-hour shifts, heavy cargo boxes strapped to the back, roads that would rattle the fillings out of your teeth. And this scooter kept showing up for its shift, day after day, without the mechanical failures that cost a rider an entire day's wages. Its air-cooled engine isn't sophisticated, and it was never meant to be. What it offers instead is forgiveness, tolerance for heat, for dust. For the missed service interval that inevitably happens when you're too busy earning a living to think about maintenance schedules. That forgiveness matters more to a working rider than any spec sheet number ever could. Spare parts are inexpensive, and there isn't a roadside mechanic in the country who can't fix this thing blindfolded. Which keeps downtime, the real enemy of anyone depending on two wheels for income, close to zero. Real-world reliability, this scooter proves, often gets tested not in a laboratory, but on a delivery route at rush hour. And the next century earned its reputation on an entirely different kind of battlefield, one measured not in hours, but in kilometers. Somewhere in the archives of long-distance riding communities is a story about number 12, an owner who rode this exact scooter over 1,100 kilometers in a single continuous journey, refusing to swap it for anything with a bigger engine. Just to prove a point to skeptical friends, the scooter finished the trip without a single mechanical complaint. What makes that possible isn't raw power, it's thermal discipline. The engineers behind this model focus less on peak performance and more on how the engine behaves, not in the first 10 minutes of a ride, but in the 90th, when heat has had time to build and lesser machines start to strain. Where competitors begin feeling stressed after prolonged high-speed running, this one simply settles into a steady rhythm and holds it. Owners mention something almost counterintuitive: the scooter seems to get more comfortable the longer they ride it, as though it was tuned specifically to fight fatigue rather than chase a faster sprint time. Seat contouring, suspension calibration, even mirror positioning all seem to serve that same quiet purpose, keeping the rider fresh over distance, not just the engine cool. Servicing intervals stay honest rather than artificially stretched to look impressive on paper. A machine built for endurance, it turns out, often becomes one of the most dependable machines you can own, almost as a side effect. But raw distance is only one kind of stress test. The next scooter was built to survive an enemy far more unpredictable than the open road. Weather doesn't care about engineering reputations. And number 11 was designed by a team that understood that better than most. There's a small but telling design choice buried in this scooter's electrical system. Every major connector is sealed to a standard normally reserved for machines built for coastal or monsoon-heavy markets specifically, rather than a global one-size-fits-all specification. That decision came directly from field data. Engineers in flood-prone regions were seeing corrosion failures that never showed up in dry climate testing. So the company quietly over-engineered the wiring for the worst-case scenario instead of the average one. The payoff shows up years later, in owners across humid coastal cities who simply never experience the electrical faults that plague less protected competitors from the inside out. A common misconception is that all scooters handle rain equally badly. Riders assume soaked electronics are just an unavoidable cost of two-wheeled transportation. This scooter quietly disproves that assumption every single monsoon season. For owners, the payoff is simply not having to think about it. Riders describe years of exposure to brutal conditions with almost no unexpected failures, and repair costs stay predictable because there's simply less going wrong. If reliability is truly proven in the worst conditions rather than the best ones, this scooter already passed the hardest exam there is. And the machine at number 10 has quietly become the exam other manufacturers are graded against. Halfway through this countdown, we reach number 10, the scooter mechanics use as their unspoken measuring stick. Independent repair shops that service a dozen different brands will often tell you the same thing, almost word for word, when this engine comes in. It's usually for tires or brake pads, never anything structural. That reputation isn't manufactured through advertising. It's earned across decades of engineering that evolved carefully instead of being torn up and reinvented every few years. Every time a manufacturer redesigns an engine from scratch, they introduce new and proven failure points along with it. This one refined what already worked, generation after generation, until even its known weak points became so well documented that experienced buyers simply learned to avoid them. Compared to flashier rivals that redesign their core engine every 5 years chasing the latest trend, this scooter's stubborn consistency looks almost boring on a spec sheet, and yet it consistently outlasts nearly all of them. For an owner, that produces something rare: predictability that holds steady across the entire life of the vehicle, not just the honeymoon period in year one. Standing as a benchmark, though, doesn't mean the story peaks here. The next 5 machines push dependability even further, and one of them might genuinely surprise you. Owners of number 9 use a word to describe it that would sound like criticism anywhere else, boring. They mean it as the highest compliment they can give. There's a persistent misconception in the scooter world that reliability and excitement are somehow linked, that a genuinely dependable machine must also be thrilling to look at or talk about. This scooter quietly demolishes that idea every single day it starts without hesitation. It isn't chasing trends. It isn't experimenting with unproven technology just to look modern in a brochure. Every component feels chosen for one reason alone: the long and glamorous track record of simply not failing. Picture a scooter still running strong past the 10-year mark, having needed nothing beyond tires, brake pads, and routine oil changes, while flashier competitors from the same era have long since been scrapped. There's a specific kind of ownership story attached to this machine: families passing the same scooter down from parent to newly licensed teenager. Not because it's exciting to ride, but because it's never once given anyone a reason to distrust it. This machine suits the rider who sees a vehicle as a tool rather than a personality statement. And for that rider, it delivers precisely what it promises without a hint of drama. But predictability is only the foundation. The next scooter adds something extra that lifts it even higher up this ranking. Number 8 solved it. Problem so common that most riders assumed it was simply unavoidable: the maddening cold start hesitation that plagued carbureted scooters for years. That extra few seconds of choking and sputtering on a freezing morning that everyone just learned to live with. This model's shift to modern fuel injection wasn't just a spec sheet upgrade. It specifically targeted that exact frustration, and it worked so well that it quietly became one of the biggest generational improvements in this scooter's entire production history. Owners who'd ridden the older carbureted version described the change almost like switching to a different machine entirely: one press of the starter, instant response, no coaxing required, even after months sitting untouched in a garage. Meanwhile, the mechanical core underneath stayed largely unchanged, carried forward from a design already proven across nearly 2 decades of continuous production. That's the formula: modernize selectively, keep what's already earned its trust, fix only what was actually broken. Fuel efficiency holds steady across the vehicle's life instead of quietly declining with age, keeping running costs consistent for years. Selective evolution, it turns out, often beats a complete reinvention. The next scooter on our list takes the opposite philosophy entirely, stripping things down rather than adding them. At number 7 sits a scooter built on a deliberately unfashionable idea. The most reliable component in any machine is the one that was never installed in the first place. While competing brands race toward digital dashboards and connectivity features nobody asked for, this manufacturer's engineering team made an unusual internal argument that every added sensor was one more thing that could quietly betray an owner 5 years down the road. And they won that argument. The result is a scooter that feels almost defiantly simple next to its rivals. There's a real advantage buried in that simplicity that most buyers never consider. A mechanic who has never even seen this exact model can diagnose a fault in minutes instead of hours, because there's simply less hidden inside to go wrong. Owners describe an almost meditative confidence riding this machine, knowing there's very little complexity waiting to ambush them on some ordinary Tuesday. That doesn't mean it feels stripped down or primitive. Every genuine essential rider needs is still there. But every feature clearly had to earn its place before being added, rather than being included simply because the technology existed. Sometimes the smartest engineering decision is knowing exactly what to leave out. But minimalism isn't the only route to lasting trust. The next scooter proves that decades of pure manufacturing discipline can achieve something just as remarkable. Number 6 belongs to a manufacturer that treats quality control less like a checklist and more like a religion, and the proof is almost unheard of in this segment. Before this specific model ever reaches a showroom floor, every single engine is individually run-tested on a bench, not just sampled in batches the way most competitors do to save time and cost. That's a slower, more expensive way to build a scooter, and it shows in an early failure rate that sits noticeably below the segment average. A statistic independent repair networks have quietly confirmed over years of service records. The engineering itself isn't dramatically more advanced than its rivals. What's different is the discipline behind assembling it, tolerance by tolerance, unit by unit, with nobody cutting the process short to hit a monthly production quota. For an owner, that translates into something hard to quantify but easy to feel: confidence from the very first ride. With no anxious first few thousand kilometers spent wondering if something's about to go wrong. Reliability, this scooter proves, isn't only a matter of clever design, it's just as much a matter of how consistently that design gets executed on the factory floor, thousands of times over. And coming up next is a scooter that mechanics themselves have started quietly steering customers toward, for a reason that's almost self-defeating for their own business. At number 5. We reach a machine with a reputation so strong among professional mechanics that they half joke about resenting it. One veteran technician, after 20 years in the trade, put it simply: this is the scooter that never pays his bills. A repair shop survives on recurring business, and here's a machine that quietly starves that business by simply refusing to break down. That says more about its build quality than any spec sheet ever could. This model earned its reputation across years of punishing real-world conditions: gridlocked city traffic, cracked rural roads, relentless stop-start riding that grinds lesser machines down. One engineering choice in particular stands out: a slightly oversized clutch system, built with deliberate extra tolerance specifically to survive endless stop-and-go traffic without the premature wear that plagues competitors. A component so overbuilt that some mechanics privately call it the part that refuses to die. That single decision alone has spared countless owners from a repair bill that shows up like clockwork on other scooters. Owners describe the experience as effortless, almost forgettable in the best possible sense, years passing between anything beyond scheduled maintenance. When mechanics themselves start recommending a vehicle specifically because it generates less work for them, that's a signal worth paying close attention to. And if you've made it this far into the countdown, reliability clearly matters to you, so take a second and hit that like button. Because the final 4 scooters on this list are about to earn their place among the most dependable machines ever built. Number 4 solved a problem that has quietly plagued the entire scooter industry for years: belt and transmission wear inside continuously variable transmission systems. Anyone who's owned a CVT scooter in a hot climate knows the anxiety of that slowly degrading belt. The sudden loss of power at the worst possible moment. The expensive replacement that always seems to arrive sooner than promised. This manufacturer's engineers ran an unusual internal experiment years ago of mounting infrared thermal cameras on test units to map exactly where transmission heat was building up, then redesigning the cooling ducts specifically around that data instead of guessing. The result speaks for itself. Hailed life on this model regularly outlasts the segment average by a wide margin. And independent comparisons against rival CVT scooters consistently place this transmission near the top of every durability chart in its class. That's not a small saving over a decade of ownership. It's real money staying in an owner's pocket, year after year. Owners consistently praise how smooth power delivery feels, a direct result of that transmission finally running at the temperature it was always meant to run at. Long-distance riders in particular notice the difference, describing consistent and strained performance even after hours of continuous highway use. Solving one well-known, industry-wide weakness elevated an already solid platform into something genuinely exceptional. But the top 3 scooters on this list don't just solve one weakness, they were engineered to eliminate nearly every point of failure at once. Number 3 is the scooter that entire taxi and rental fleets have quietly standardized on, for a reason that has nothing to do with comfort or styling. The pure and glamorous cost per kilometer math. Fleet operators track every failure obsessively, because downtime directly costs them money, and this scooter consistently posts the lowest breakdown rate across their entire lineup, year after year. Its entire engineering philosophy rests on redundancy and margin, components deliberately built with extra tolerance rather than engineered right up to the edge of their limits to save weight or cost. That extra margin means ordinary wear takes noticeably longer to become an actual problem. And even the imperfect maintenance habits common in a busy rental fleet rarely spiral into catastrophic failure. There's something almost defiantly old-fashioned about that approach in an era when so many manufacturers chase every possible gram and dollar of savings. Owners and fleet managers alike routinely describe crossing the 100,000-kilometer mark with the original engine still running strong, a milestone most scooters never even approach. Sometimes the most advanced reliability engineering isn't found in some exotic new material or clever sensor, it's simply the discipline to never cut corners, anywhere, on any component. But even this remarkable machine has to step aside for two scooters that have reached something close to mythical status among the riders who've owned them longest. Number 2 has earned something close to a cult following in exactly the places you'd least expect a scooter to survive at all: remote regions where fuel quality is inconsistent, formal servicing is rare, and roads barely deserve the name. In several of these markets, this scooter has become the default choice for postal carriers and small commercial couriers, specifically because it tolerates conditions that would destroy a more delicately engineered machine. Within a year, the secret sits in remarkably forgiving engine tolerances, deliberately engineered loose rather than tight, so that inconsistent fuel and irregular maintenance don't translate directly into engine damage the way they would on a more precisely tuned rival. That priority doesn't photograph well for a glossy brochure, but it produces results that are almost impossible to overstate. In some regions, owners report scooters still running strong after 15, even 20 years of continuous daily use, kept alive by nothing more than basic maintenance and the occasional replace part. Ownership here isn't transactional, it's generational, a scooter handed down from one family member to the next, trusted the way you trust an old friend who has simply never once let you down. True reliability, this machine proves, isn't tested in ideal conditions. It's tested when everything else has already gone wrong, and the engine still turns over. Which finally brings us to the single most reliable scooter ever to earn the top spot on this list. And now, number 1. The scooter the entire industry quietly measures itself against. Ask engineers at rival manufacturers, off the record, which competitor's engine they respect most, and this name comes up more than any other, an open secret nobody officially admits to. This reputation wasn't built in a single breakthrough moment. It was built across decades of relentless, patient refinement, where nearly every conceivable mechanical weakness has already been found, studied, and quietly engineered out. 3 years of unglamorous real-world feedback gathered from millions of units across dozens of countries. There's no single dramatic innovation behind this scooter's legendary status, no headline-grabbing new material, no revolutionary system. Instead, its reliability is the sum of thousands of small, careful engineering decisions made correctly and consistently across a production run so long that most manufacturers never live to see their own designs mature that far. Owners don't just trust this machine. They talk about it with something closer to genuine affection, built across years of it quietly, consistently, never letting them down through storms, heat waves, and decades of daily grind. Mechanics across entirely different countries and climates report the same story. Almost word for word, minimal unexpected failures. Remarkably consistent performance no matter the conditions. An engine that seems almost indifferent to neglect. Resale value stays exceptionally strong for exactly this reason, because buyers know precisely what they're getting, even when the unit they're looking at is already a decade old. This scooter was never the fastest. It was never the flashiest. It doesn't need to be, when the only question that actually matters is whether a machine will still be running reliably 10 or 15 years from today. This is the answer riders around the world keep returning to, generation after generation. So there is 15 scooters, and 15 completely different reasons for their reputations. A cost-cutting decision that accidentally became a legend. A repair shop that quietly resents a machine for never bringing it business. A postal fleet in a remote region that trusts a 15-year-old engine more than anything new on the market. Real reliability, it turns out, was never about flashy marketing or an impressive spec sheet. It's about thousands of small, disciplined engineering decisions made correctly, over and over again, until a machine simply refuses to fail you. If this countdown helped you understand what actually separates a truly dependable scooter from one that just looks good in a showroom, there's another video waiting for you right now, one that breaks down the biggest maintenance mistakes riders make that quietly destroy even the most reliable machines on this list. Mistakes you're probably making right now without even realizing it. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed, so you never miss the next deep dive into the machines that have truly earned our trust.